Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is the 10th of September, 2025, a Wednesday. And as I'm making this video, Bitcoin is around 114K. Ethereum is about $4,350. And Kaspa, let's find where Kaspa is here. Kaspa is trading at about 0.82 or about 8.25 cents. So what I wanted to do for you guys today is give you an overall perspective of where we are in the market and what sort of value I am seeing in terms of both the direction I think Bitcoin is heading in and also what my expectation for Kaspa is and what I think would be a great buying point for this using my proprietary PAI metric, that Power Amplitude Index metric. So to again, this is financial. This is not financial advice. So this is just for informational purposes only. So please do your own research. So let's start off by looking at what we have in terms of the power law. The power law basically tells us that if we take the log of the time since Genesis on the x-axis and the log of the price on the y-axis, we end up with a very straight trend line. Or rather, we end up with a plot that can be represented quite accurately by a trend line over here that does a pretty good job. And then by making the assumption that the future is going to be like the past and the same trend continues, we can extrapolate to what we believe is going to be the value for Bitcoin going forward. So this is for Bitcoin over here. And under this analysis, we're looking at an expectation of Bitcoin in a year's time on trend of about $144,000. Now that's maybe about a 25% or so increase, maybe 30% increase from where we are right now, 30%, right? And what we do know, however, is that is just the trend. If we look at it in more in depth, we see that every 4 years, we tend to overshoot that trend line. And currently we are coming to that point. So December 2017, November 2021, 4 years would lead us around November 2025 or so, where we expect the price of Bitcoin to considerably go up above the trend line. And if those expectations are correct, we end up with an expectation that the price, which in a year later is expected to be 144, could significantly go above that. And my expectation, based on some sort of residual analysis, which we can do, which I'm not going to get into, is that we may potentially see prices in the 150 to 200K. There is a small probability that we end up with prices that can be considerably higher than 200K. But my base case is that we likely will end up with something around 150, 200K. It's a little difficult to be more accurate than that. 200K would be a fairly decent price. That represents maybe what, 50, 60% increase from where we are right now. Quite a bit. So good situation. Of course, when that happens, we also find what happens is that the prices of the altcoin market or prices of coins in the altcoin market also take off, right? Because we're seeing this residual. So if Bitcoin goes way above this line over here, then we expect the altcoin to be also pumping up considerably. And initially, the target that I was looking at was Kaspa, which was also following a power law analysis, doing that same analysis in the log domain. But since about September, the price, September last year or so, the price of Kaspa has dipped significantly below the trend line. And it's uncertain at this point whether it's going to reach this higher value or whether it's going to come back to this trend line or not. If it were, and I get asked this question a lot, the 1 year prediction for Kaspa is about 45 cents. But what we're really expecting is that when these prices take off, that is when the Bitcoin price takes off and it becomes much higher than this trend line, we expect the entire altcoin also market to jump up. At that point, Kaspa may come back to its trend line or it may even exceed that trend line. And in order to estimate what would be a good buying point for Kaspa, without using this power law dynamic, because we can see that it's way below the trend line now, I developed the Power Amplitude Index. And the PAI over here is a completely independent way of looking at the trend of which the price is going and then identifying buying opportunities by looking back upon the history of that particular coin. So for in this case, the PAI looks at how Kaspa has performed in the past and gives us a value ranging from 0 to 1. The closer it is to 1, the redder it is, the relatively more overbought or much higher than trend is the price, and the closer it is to 0 or the bluer it is, that represents a good buying opportunity. And these values over here that you see, the colors are generated only by looking at data in the past from that particular point. So if I went to July 2024 and I looked backwards on that, I would see exactly the same colors. Okay. So it's only looking back on the history of that particular asset if I were at that particular time. So if I went back in a time machine, this is what I would see. And by looking at that, we can see that it's done a really good job of calling a number of bottoms. It's not perfect, but it does do a fantastic job of figuring out when is a good buying opportunity. And in order to figure out how blue we should weight in order for good opportunities, we can look at this cumulative distribution here. The cumulative distribution is merely saying, okay, what percentage of the time has it been at this PAI or lower, right? So we can see that it spent about 6.9 for Kaspa. It spent about 6.9% and 13.9% in the dark blue and blue regions. So this is about 20.8, which is the sum of these two. And that means if it spent 20% of the time below this price or up till this price, then it spent 80% of the time above this price, right? And that's kind of the situation, a good risk to reward ratio that I would like to buy Kaspa at. So if I'm looking at it in the bottom 20%, then I feel that there's a lot of headroom up there in order for me to buy. And so this comes to what the current Kaspa value is right now. It's about 0.3, right? At a value of about 8.25 cents. So what that is saying is that according to the PAI, we think that it has been lower than this price, all things being considered, looking back upon its own history, about 30% of the time, right? And that's not saying that it's going to go down 30% lower. It's just saying that it's in below this price 30% of the time based on this particular PAI algorithm. And so it's been above about 70% of the time. Now, that's not a bad buying price, right? And you can see by this table over here, it's at about 0.3-ish or so, given the current price, which is about 0.083. But for me, in order to feel comfortable, I would want to wait until it gets to the 0.2 PAI, right? That is the price based on all the algorithms that the PAI looks at going back on its own history, that it can make this assessment that, hey, we are at the bottom 20% of the time, bottom 20% of the price really that we've had, not so much time, sorry, just to clarify. It's telling us what this is the bottom 20% of the price that we've had with respect to time. So as you can see, that's really clearly explained here when you look at the time in the PAI zone. So I'm not trying to confuse anyone, but it sometimes can get a little confusing, right? So the PAI is talking about, look, has it been, what percent of the time has it been bluer than where it is right now? That's another way to understand this. And for me, with my current risk to reward ratio, I would want to wait for 0.2. Now, we are getting to that point in the cycle where the rubber meets the road, right? Coming back to our map over here, for these residuals from the Bitcoin power law, if the 4-year pattern holds, we should be getting to the point where these values spike up. Every year, every cycle, the jump above the trend line is not as extreme as it was in the previous cycle, right? So we don't know how much it's going to go up this time. But if it does, we expect that the price of Kaspa would also shoot up. And so it's unclear whether we're going to get the 0.2 risk values or not, the PAI values. But for me, given that I already have a position in Kaspa, it makes more sense that if I'm going to add to it, I'm going to add to it at really advantageous prices. If I don't get it, that's okay. but I am a power law investor and I'm waiting for these disproportionate returns. And the disproportionate returns are going to come if I buy at the right price. So just buying at a middling price is not really going to do it for me. Now, your situation might be somewhat different, but you can see that if you were buying at the 0.3 or lower, it's been there almost about 44% of the time or 43% of the time. So that means it's been above that maybe 57% of the time. So I hope that helps you guys give a real clear picture of where we are. This allows us to use a dynamic DCA so that the lower it goes, the more we can buy. And if you haven't got a position, everyone's got to figure out what's a comfortable PAI level for them to jump into the situation. So I wanted to leave you guys with this takeaway message that we are getting to the point in the cycle where prices are going to jump for Bitcoin if the future is like the past. So it typically happens every 4 years. It's going to happen Q4 2025, maybe Q1 26. Generally, it's followed by a bear market after that, right? And you can see what that looks like on the residuals is that the price also drops, right? And so February 2019, November 2022, and then we would see towards the end of 2026 that we would go way below the trend line. And when Bitcoin goes, everything else follows in the crypto market. So if we're going to peak, it's going to be in the next 2 quarters. And if you believe that Kaspa does have some great potential in front of it, which I do, then we don't know what sort of PAI level that we're going to get to. So that being said, everyone should do their own analysis, and you can find out more details about this by going to my website and signing up at powerlawinvestor.com. And you can just ask questions here on the YouTube video too, and I will try and answer them as rapidly as I can. So thanks for listening. Please do like and subscribe and hit the notify bell so that you find out about the latest analysis. And wishing you good luck in the upcoming couple of quarters. We're going to find out how it goes. All right. Ciao.